All right, Tumbler family. So what I'm starting off with is some anti-scratch cat tape that I got off of Amazon. And basically what that is just another type of double-sided adhesive tape that I've cut a rectangular shape into using my Silhouette Cameo. My dimensions for this is 8.1 inches in height by 9.23 inches in width. And this is going to fit a 20-ounce skinny straight tumbler that I'm going to be using from Craft Haven. What I just applied to the top of that was a super fine glitter dust, or basically like a pigment powder, and all that does is just highlight the outline of that rectangle just to make it easier for me to see, since I am going to be trimming this down by hand, since I didn't adjust my settings in my Cameo to cut all the way through that. I do like to keep my larger pieces, as I'll utilize those for other projects. Now this has become one of my favorite methods to use in making tumblers recently, just because it saves a lot of time as it cuts out all of the prep work. There's no sanding, no painting, or having to wait for the paint to gas off. I just apply it to the cup and we're good to go. So even though I know I have this cut the way that I want, my OCD says, hey, you still have to make sure that everything lines up nice and neat. And it does, and I'm happy with that. So now I'm just going to apply this to the tumbler, no different than I would any other piece of adhesive vinyl. I'm going to peel back and trim off about 1 inch to 1.5 inch strip of that backing and expose the sticky adhesive underneath. And one trick that I've learned to make sure that this not only goes on straight instead of crooked and also aligns nice and neat around the rim is by actually flipping my cup upside down. That just allows everything to sit nice and flush against the counter and help ensure that everything goes on straight. If for whatever reason you do have to make an adjustment, it should not be a big deal to just peel off that little piece that was adhered and do it again. Once you're happy with how that sits, now just peel away a little bit more of the backing, flip the cup over, and use your fingers as a squeegee to walk this all the way around. Make sure you use some good pressure on there to help avoid any sort of air pockets. From here, I like to place my tumbler on my Bling Queen, which I got from the Bowen, and I'll make sure to have this linked in the description box below. I like this tool because it keeps my tumbler suspended in the air so I don't have to roll it across the countertop for this next step. Since some foils are a little bit delicate, this just helps prevent them from getting scratched. And here is my foil of choice. This is called abalone or abalone, however it's properly pronounced, that I got from Southern Belle Glitter, and I'll make sure to have this linked in the description box below as well. Now, just like I did with the double-sided adhesive tape, I am going to trim this down just so there's not any waste. So whatever is left over, I am going to utilize for other projects, plus it just makes it a little bit easier to handle. So if you noticed, I've already peeled away a little bit of that white paper, just exposing some more of that double-sided adhesive tape. And now I'm just going to lay the foil on here and press it down really well and try to make sure that this goes on as smooth as possible. Oh, here goes the OCD again. I gotta make sure everything lines up nice and neat, and I'm happy with that. So now again, I'm just gonna peel down a little bit of that white paper, and I'm going to use my thumbs and just run it up and down the length of the tumbler, again trying to make sure this goes as smooth as possible, that it doesn't go on wrinkly. So I am going to hold that foil kind of nice and taut, and once I make sure that I've got it on there a good bit, again no different than I did with the double-sided adhesive tape. Are y'all noticing a pattern at this point? I'm just going to take my thumbs and apply it by just putting some pressure and walking this all the way around. So now I'm going to take my actual squeegee and really just go to town on this thing. So just rub, 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 rub. You just want to make sure that that foil is really going to adhere to that double-sided adhesive tape underneath. Now, once I get to that back area where that excess foil is hanging off, not a big deal. I'm just going to take some scissors and trim it down. Now I need to peel away the plastic coating that comes on top of that foil. This you want to be very mindful and diligent about and not rush this step. If you get any sort of resistance as you're peeling away this plastic coating, it means that the foil did not fully adhere to the tape underneath, so you'll need to take a squeegee and just rub the areas until you no longer get any resistance. Once I had the plastic coating completely removed, I did just go ahead and apply my first layer of epoxy. I do not believe that you have to seal this, but if you're one of those who would rather be safe than sorry, there is absolutely no harm in sealing it first. The template that I'm going to be using on this tumbler is called Orion, and I got it from Pumpkins. And just like the double-sided adhesive tape as well as the foil, I'll try to remember to have it linked in the description box below, so that way if y'all want it, you know where to go get it. I opted to go ahead and cut this pattern in black vinyl instead of using stencil vinyl and then spray painting the cup and then peeling away, you know, the portions that I didn't want like a standard peekaboo. This just saved a lot of time. You can obviously use whatever color vinyl you want. I just liked the stark contrast with the black on there. And so all I did was just apply my transfer tape, and then again, just like I did with the adhesive tape as well as the foil, I'm going to cut it down to size just to make it a lot easier to apply to the tumbler. Once I have my template cut down to size, I like to do what I call a pre-pill. For me, that just ensures that the vinyl has actually stuck to my transfer tape, that it's not stayed stuck to that paper backing. You can see I've got a couple of spots that are being silly, not a big deal. I'll just give them a good rub down and then make sure that those have transferred to the tape as well instead of staying stuck to the paper backing. And just like we did with the double-sided adhesive at the very beginning, I'm going to trim away about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of that backing paper, and then I'm going to flip my cup upside down. I'm going to flip my pattern upside down, make sure everything is nice and flush against the counter, and then apply this pattern to the tumbler using the same method that we did for the foil as well as the double-sided adhesive tape. So one big thing that I just wanted to reiterate, and it should be common sense, but I know that this is something that I've been guilty of, so I'm sure other people have been guilty of it as well, is just paying attention to the direction of your pattern as you apply it to your tumbler, especially if you utilize this method of flipping your cup upside down. There's nothing worse than getting your pattern on there and it looking absolutely gorgeous, only to find that when you pick your cup back up, oops, I've applied this the wrong way. So just pay attention to that. And then once you do have your pattern on the tumbler, just take your squeegee and give it a good rub down to make sure that the vinyl has actually stuck to the tumbler, and remove your transfer tape. Now I'm going to apply my outlines or offsets, however you want to refer to them. And I'm using a holographic vinyl that I got from the Michael's Craft Store. I believe this is just the Cricut brand. And since this is the finishing touches of the tumbler, I do get pretty particular about this. For me, this is something that elevates a good-looking tumbler to phenomenal. So I just take my time in making sure everything is placed exactly where I want it. I'm obviously starting off with the wavy area, and so I'll show you how I do the first 2 or 3 just to give you the gist, and then you're just going to repeat the steps all the way around until all of the wavy areas are covered. So now I want to outline the drops of water on the tumbler, but how I did this was a little bit different than I did for the wavy lines. I actually ended up pulling away all of the pieces of vinyl from around the drops of water and placing them on an extra sheet of that waxy backing paper that I had laying around. The reason why I did this is because I don't like there being a lot of waste of vinyl, and so if I could ever utilize anything for another project, that's what I want to do. And that's the same reason why I actually did not pull out the centers for these drops of water. I wanted to be able to utilize it for another project. So all I did was I took a small piece of transfer tape, enough to cover one row at a time, and all I'm trying to pull off is just the outlines for the drops of water that were cut into this piece of vinyl. In actually placing the outlines on the tumbler, what I am personally looking at is for all of the tips of those drops of water to come into perfect alignment. And then what I will do is I'll take my thumb and run it down the middle of that transfer tape to actually push that vinyl onto the tumbler, and then I'll go back and push outward. So always working from the middle out, and that also helps avoids any sort of air pocketing. And then if for whatever reason something doesn't align the way that I want it to, I can always just peel that one little piece and readjust it as needed. And then just like with the wavy lines on how I applied those, I'll show you how I did the first 2 or 3 rows just to give you the gist, and then you'll just continue the method until all of the drops of water are completely covered. So here she is, outlined and beautiful, and this next step is going to be super important, especially if you work with any sort of holographic or metallic vinyl. It does have a tendency of lifting under epoxy, so it does need to be sealed. Here are two different types of spray sealants that you can use. The first one is Minwax Polycrylic. The second one was the Krylon Triple Thick. Once the spray sealant has dried, I'm obviously going to jump into my first layer of epoxy. I really like the Counterculture brand. It's always worked really well for me, and I'm using their regular Fast set. This cures in about 2 to 4 hours depending on how thick you apply this. I know they've recently released their Turbo set, which usually cures in about an hour. I've not had a chance to order it yet, so I'm obviously going to utilize what I have on hand. Now, once I get the entire tumbler coated in a layer of epoxy, I'm going to take my torch and I'm going to start popping all of those naughty little micro bubbles because I want this to look as smooth as possible. So once that layer of epoxy has cured, I'm going to take my craft knife and just clean the very top rim of my cup and make sure that there's no epoxy stuck on there. I actually had one little piece of vinyl sticking up from one of the wavy outlines, so I just trimmed that down as well. Once that top rim was completely cleaned, I'm going to do what our friend Jessica Flynn from Flynn Sisters Boutique has taught us to do, and I'm going to take an 80 grit sanding block and just go around the side edge of the tumbler, exposing just a little bit of that stainless steel. So that way, as we're placing our last layer of epoxy on there, it's actually adhered to the side edge of the tumbler, not on the very top where the seal would be the weakest. All right, tumbler family, so here she is in her last layer of epoxy. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I hope y'all found this tutorial fun and relatively easy to follow. I love y'all. I'll catch you next time.